Hey, what's up, everybody? It's your boy Will coming at y'all once again. This is Phantom Frequency. If you're joining us for the first time or you've been with us many times, y'all know it's the multiverse of pop culture. We talk about all sorts of topics, mostly movies, TV, anime, and now we're going to be talking about more wrestling and more music going forward. And we're going to start leaning into those more niche topics. There's been so many TV shows and recent releases coming out. We wanted to make sure to hit all those because I'm a huge movie and TV show nerd. So all these big releases like House of the Dragon, The Boys, what have you, all that stuff I wanted to make sure to hit. Had some big movies coming out in June as well. A couple big ones. A couple of them I actually ended up missing. July is going to be stacked as well. We're leading into Deadpool, and that's what brings us here today because we are continuing the X-Men review series. We're doing all 12 of the main X-Men, Deadpool, Wolverine films. The New Mutants, I'm going to actually probably save that for a much shorter excuse me, a much shorter format type video. After we're done wrapping up all the main stuff with Deadpool and whatnot, leading into Deadpool and Wolverine. So make sure you keep your eyes peeled for that one. But we're going to be doing a lot of different stuff like that. So make sure you guys are showing that support on the video and everything like that. And for all of you showing the support on the X-Men review series, we appreciate it. Some of our biggest views on almost any single video. I think X2 is still the most viewed review so far in this series. And that one got about like a little over 3K. So thank you so much, guys. Really appreciate it and really appreciate all of you out there. But yeah, we're going to be getting into one of the more controversial entries in the series, to say the least. That is for sure. And hadn't seen this for literally 5 years. That's a reason we're going to get into in just a moment as I get into kind of my background with the film. And just giving context like I usually do for people that are just joining the review series, maybe with this one. And before you go back, just so you know my context as an X-Men fan and my everything like that with Marvel. Very big Marvel fan, very big X-Men fan. The X-Men are my favorite element of Marvel Comics. That is the reason why I'm always been more of a Marvel versus DC guy. You know, they got Teen Titans and Justice League and different teams like that, but those ones never connected to me on the same level like X-Men. And that was no different with the films. I saw the first original one on VHS in 2001 and then went and saw X2 in every single entry in the X-Men franchise. The only technical X-Men franchise movie that I didn't see in this Fox era that we just got done with, this movie in particular, but technically the New Mutants, because it got pushed back so much. It was supposed to come out around the time of Dark Phoenix as well, by the way, if I'm not mistaken, but it just ended up coming out about a year or two later during the kind of mid to tail end of the pandemic, or right in the middle of it. I can't quite remember because a couple of those years are a little bit of a blur, for obvious reasons, right? But yeah, so I've been with the ride with this X-Men franchise the entire time leading into 2019 when they announced Dark Phoenix back in 2017, I believe, or 2016, somewhere around that time when the previous entry Apocalypse came out, and it came out 2 years after Days of Future Past. That entry to me is by far the weakest, and this one to me is not. That's the one thing I'm going to kind of bury the lead right there. I'm definitely not one of those people that thinks this is the worst movie, but once this thing finally released, a lot of people were hating on this movie, did not like Dark Phoenix, thought it was a complete letdown as the X-Men franchise cap that it kind of seemed to be before we kind of we got Deadpool 3, aka Deadpool and Wolverine, confirmed and announced. This was kind of just the end of everything, right? And the culmination of this quadrilogy that we've been doing, this series of prequels they started to reboot the franchise with First Class 7 years, 8 years, sorry, 8 years prior. So it had been running for pretty much the whole 2010s decade. And so that was the end of that era. And yeah, man. So that was kind of the thing going into it. A lot of people weren't really hyped on it. That definitely seemed like much more of a letdown when you're talking about the overall public opinion, but it definitely had its fans out there, and I might be one of them. So when it comes to my background when going to see this thing, I actually saw this with my late great friend Michael Kiefer, and he was the only one that was available to go see it. So we actually went and got something to eat beforehand and went and saw it together. And he had a blast with it and actually enjoyed it a lot more than I did. Even I liked it, but I definitely have issues with it that we're gonna get into as we actually get into the real review of it. But for me, I had a good time just seeing it with my boy and just another time going to see the X-Men films. And the funny thing is, we saw all four of these films together, starting back at the drive-in when First Class in 2011, saw every single one of these together, and he became an X-Men fan just before, right after first class and stuff like that. So he was all in on seeing the new stuff. So anytime those came out, he was all in on it because he liked these movies definitely more than the MCU films. Even though there were some of those he did enjoy as well, and he caught Infinity War and Endgame as well. And the reason why I'm kind of saying it in that way is because he's no longer with us, man. You know what I'm saying? So he was kind of there for the whole MCU boom and the X-Men franchise and everything like that. So he was kind of one of those guys that I would just go nerd out and see all these X-Men films with, and I'm always going to have a special connection with these movies and with my man Michael Kiefer, you know what I mean, with my boy and one of my main mans and my boy Michael Kiefer. My bad for misspeaking there. But yeah, man. So I'm always gonna have those fond memories of going to see these films with them, and this one is no different. It was a little hard for me to watch it for a few years, actually, to be completely honest with you. Like I really couldn't bring myself to do it because every time it would just bum me out. So I just couldn't really get myself to want to sit down and watch the movie because that was literally the last time I ever seen him was that night when we went to go see the film. So that's the whole thing with it in a weird way. It's like it's an end of an era for my life, literally, and not like it was like a meant to be sort of thing. You know what I mean? And it's kind of crazy that a simple yet one of our favorite activities to do together, go to see movies, all the way back to Pineapple Express, sneaking in when we were 12, 13 years old. So film means a lot to me, and memories with my dad, memories with my with other friends and family, and I went to see the first trilogy with my parents, and I went to go see this one with my homie Michael, with my brother. So it was dope getting to share this experience with him, one of the closest people I have ever had as a friend or someone outside of like immediate family. You know what I'm saying? And just going to see it and seeing it through his eyes and seeing how much he enjoyed it just as a casual fan and was in on the storyline and didn't have the connections to the comics or the big history and the big like epic reputation that the Dark Phoenix saga has as a storyline in comics. It's considered one of the best storylines ever written. So the fact that all that wasn't really going into it for him and for other people out there, I'm sure as well. More casual fans seem to be enjoying this one more, I think, than the hardcore fans that have a lot more higher expectations, a lot more knowledge of the source material, and a lot more kind of things that they need to see in the film. Where casual fans don't really care about that as long as the story makes sense and it's entertaining and there's cool action. And there's definitely some cool ass action in this movie. I would say some of the coolest, not all time up there, but if you're talking about which X-Men, if you're going to rank the X-Men films on action, this would be in the top five, no doubt. I think that would be number 4 or 5 for action scenes alone. That don't get as cartoony as Origins Wolverine per se. The CG isn't the greatest all the time, but the fights are pretty badass, well choreographed. And when they're not leaning so hard on the CGI and it's a little more practical kind of stunt work kind of mixed in with a little bit of wire work and CGI where need be, it works really well, man. So that's the thing with this film. And now we're going to transition into more of reviewing the actual film. And when it comes to Dark Phoenix, for me, it's definitely a bit of a letdown. It's definitely a sloppy movie, but the element to it for me that really works is Simon Kinberg's knack for shooting energetic action scenes, but also being able to deal with the source material in a way that doesn't feel completely inept or feels like it's better than it and feels like it's trying to pay reverence to it in the best way it can. And I think just some of the writing was a bit sloppy, you know what I'm saying? I think the casting was really on point here. I actually like Sophie Turner as Jean Grey quite a bit. I actually think if you had a much more polished script, if you had a little more of a seasoned director, you could have got more vibes that you got from Sophie Turner in things like Game of Thrones mixed in with the more true elements of Jean Grey. And I think just getting someone maybe to be getting more time with her and Ty Sheridan's dynamic as a couple, or getting a different actor, but still doubling down on that and getting a lot more of that written into the story would have really helped the overall impact. And her performance can be a bit uneven at times. I'm not going front, like I'm not going to act like she's over here, supposed to be winning an Oscar or something like that. But I thought her performance was solid visually. I thought she really had a great physicality with the role, especially with the darker side of the character. I thought when she went more Dark Phoenix, it was working a bit better for me than when she was the good version of Jean Grey, personally, at least for me, especially going back watching this the second time. But overall, she's not really like as big of a problem for me, and I think she's actually less cartoony than Famke Jensen's version of the Dark Phoenix in Last Stand. And I would still probably put Last Stand just above this movie, but not by much because it's just a bit of a better capper to its trilogy and bringing things into a very tragic ending and a much better, more satisfying ending in this one. And the whole thing with having those different aliens in there that are that are essentially scrolls without them saying they're scrolls because they didn't have the legal rights to do it yet because Disney had not quite acquired the Fox rights for X-Men quite yet. It was at least we had at least 10 years, 11 years before they actually ended up buying that all went official. And if the rumors are true, there was a contract clause where they couldn't really do any X-Men stuff for like 5 years after the fact of when they bought it. So I think they bought it in 2019 shortly after this or 2020, and they had like a 4 or 5 year waiting period where they couldn't recast any X-Men, they couldn't really lean into that or do any of that yet. And to me, if that's true, does kind of make more sense of why we didn't get so much X-Men stuff in the beginning. I don't really necessarily think it was all of them being unprepared because you'd have to think Kevin Feige already thought about this. You'd have to already think there were ideas and different theories and things that he was already going to be pretty able to do fairly fast within a couple years, I'd say, and get an idea going and get things going. So I think there was a little bit of a contractual obligation that was there, but that's neither here nor there. But getting back into the movie at hand here for the main part. And then when it comes to that with the scrolls and stuff like that, or those shapeshifting alien, the scrolls, the discount scrolls and shit, I didn't think, oh man, Jessica Chastain, I didn't think she worked at this character at all. You could definitely tell she was detached from the material. She's a great actress and definitely was not delivering a great performance in this. But yeah, those aliens were just getting in the way and took away from a lot of the fact of just Jean Grey getting influenced by the actual Dark Phoenix entity itself. Could have cast a great actress to play do the voicing of the role if you wanted it to sound like a female, or if you wanted it to sound like a male, or if you wanted it to sound ethereal and didn't want to necessarily sound like any specific thing. We just want to cast a great voice actor, whichever gender you want to do with it, whatever, it doesn't matter to me. But I do think there was a whole missed element there of that being the influence. It's like almost like some golem type shit. You know what I mean? Like there's a voice in your head like telling you like this is what to do, and that's the way that I've always read the Phoenix Force. It's an entity, and it's manipulating and corrupting the person, similar to kind of what we saw with Scarlet Witch. And god damn it, I'm forgetting the name of the entity, but you know what I'm talking about if you've seen Doctor Strange Multiverse into the Multiverse of Madness, spoiler alert or whatever the fuck, you know what I mean? But she was fully corrupted by the Darkhold and it should have felt more like that. Because even with Sam Raimi not completely pulling off the seamless transition of WandaVision to that movie because he didn't watch it and wasn't aware of some of the character arcs, so a little bit of it just felt kind of rushed, not fleshed out, and didn't even kind of tie into what we saw before in the right way. But the performance was good. Some of the writing I didn't think was all bad. And like I said, the performance and everything really was cool, and there was a good ending to it that I hope isn't the end of everything going on there. But for this, you just didn't have that here, and it just really gets in the way of the dynamic of Jean Grey being the villain. The whole aspect of her coming to talk to Magneto about dealing with this stuff, and the whole sequence that goes down with her about to kill a bunch of these fools in the military and stuff that are messing with him and people in, I think this live action version of Genosha is what I think they're going for, a more like mutant kind of peace commune or haven for them to simply have like their own little country or their own little territory. I think this is essentially what that is. And that whole sequence in Genosha with Jean Grey and Magneto and her going full like heel dark side and him having to be the one to rein it in, to me was so effective this time around and the first time around. I really loved that part. That was one of my favorite scenes, and actually I would dare say one of the best scenes of this quadrilogy, of this prequel series of the X-Men films. I'll put that out there, man. Like there's some great moments in here where you do see some of the promise of Simon Kinberg and stuff. And I know we kind of stepped in a sense, because I know Bryan Singer was kind of being very problematic on the previous two. I'm kind of surprised Days of Future Past came together as well as it did. A lot of rumors on with that. Simon Kinberg could have been involved with that. But to me, I don't see some of that polish there. So I think someone just reined it in and got enough reshoots done enough to what Bryan Singer did and what the great script that they actually had that time, that they were able to zhuzh out and really get it to where it needed to be. This felt very rushed. This felt very sloppy. This felt very much, you could feel the reshoots in there where it's not quite sure what it wants to be, but when it's a little bit better handling on what it wants to be and kind of is letting you know really what it wants to be a little bit better at certain moments, when those moments work, they work very well. Like some of the dynamic with I almost said Patrick Stewart for some reason, but James McAvoy's Charles Xavier and her and the whole thing with him suppressing her powers and suppressing her memories and things like that. All that stuff plays into the comics very well and really plays well for the themes of this series of movies and for the X-Men as a whole. And I think if you just had a little bit of a better written script and got to the source of it and didn't have them split up for the second and third act of the movie so much until they just came together for these certain conflicts that were very well acted, by the way. I don't think it really comes together as strong as it could have, but some of it works, and you get some great. You really just get good performance from James McAvoy all the way through. Obviously, I said the same thing for Michael Fassbender. I actually think Sophie Turner, like I mentioned earlier, is pretty damn good in here. Someone else that I think is actually highly underrated in this film, and every moment that he gets, he fucking shines. And I get it because he's obviously been a good actor ever since like Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, and when I think he did the Let Me In remake. I'm talking about Cody Smith McPhee's Nightcrawler, aka Kurt Wagner. That to me was good. His performance for the bloodlust when he's going in to kill those fools to get revenge and vengeance on them. When he's playing up the more kind of soft, more of the soft side of him and not wanting people to die and get killed and trying to reason with Jean Grey and everything like that. Like I thought he just played the character very well, and I think once again with a script that had focus for him, that had a character arc for him, man, he could have just knocked it out of the park. But I still think what he had, he knocked it out of the park. Even so, it just wasn't as impactful to the story and the film overall. And sometimes, if you haven't had a fresh watch on the film, you might even forget about some of those moments. And I did for sure. But he had some of the most standout moments in there, like the train sequence with him killing those fools and using his tail and really leaning into how deadly Nightcrawler can be when he wants to be and he's willing to take lives like that. You know what I mean? Like just to take fools out. I mean, like he'll do it. Like when he wants to lean into it, he'll do it. So I really like that element. I'm forgetting her name right now. What's her name? Alexandra Shipp as Storm, solid, but once again, very underwritten. Not much to do there, unfortunately. Nicholas Holt's performance as Hank McCoy, aka Beast, was good, but I do think some of the writing there was a little sloppy and kind of had him a bit out of character and had him a little more vengeful than I think. Or a little more also like illogical than I think normally Hank McCoy would be. At least the Hank McCoy, the Beast that I know from the animated series and the comics, doesn't quite feel as quite genuine to me. And even the Kelsey Grammer version, I couldn't see really doing this, which is essentially supposed to be the same person. So I don't know, but that didn't quite work for me as well. Like I gotta kill her now and everything like that. And the whole thing with him and Raven and the love story doesn't work well. The whole way she gets taken out and everything like that was pretty fucked up and effective. But overall, like that whole love story element and the revenge he felt for that, I didn't feel at all. They never had any chemistry, and that relationship didn't feel like it went anywhere, so it felt kind of pointless to me. Her trying to reason with Jean Grey and everything like that. And Jennifer Lawrence's performance is not terrible in this movie in those certain more emotional moments, but the rest of the time I feel like she's kind of phoning it in. But you could definitely tell she lost interest in it. Barely's in the makeup. It's all CG, so it doesn't even look as good. You can tell it's CG, so it doesn't have that same visceral kind of look and real feel that Mystique's always had throughout the X-Men franchise. So that was another element that was really missing here. So like I said, for everything they get right, there's like a few more missteps to go along with it. So it's a very sloppy film, but I don't think this movie gets quite enough credit to where I don't think it's as bad as some people say it is. I think it's a much better film to me personally than Dark Phoenix. Not much than not Dark Phoenix. I'm not even knowing what I'm saying here. Dark Phoenix is a much better movie to me than Apocalypse. It's definitely much better than Origins Wolverine. And depending on when I do this rewatch of the Wolverine, who knows how I might feel about it. I might even have a more controversial opinion and say this is better because I felt like that third act just really fell apart. But the whole Japan element and the real setup and all that stuff for the Wolverine, I remember being pretty fucking cool. So we'll see what happens because that's the next stop here on the X-Men journey, if you will. But like I said, overall, I think this film's a bit overhated. I think it's a little bit underrated. I'd probably give it a 6.57 at most. You know what I'm saying? I don't think this is like an amazing film or anything like that. But I would say ranking the overall X-Men film franchise, it's not going to be quite top 5, but it's midway in top 10. Like, if it was a bit more solid written, I'm telling you, this would be a number 5, number 4 of all time movie. But they don't quite get there for me on this one. But I want to hear y'all's opinions on it. Do you think this film's a little underrated? Did you hate it, or do you still hate it when you watch it today? Could you just not enjoy the film? Are you somewhere a little more in between, kind of enjoying it and hating it? Do you kind of like certain things and not like other things? That's kind of my experience with it. I'm a little more frustrated by it at points, but overall, I do think it's a little more of a solid, entertaining X-Men film. And if you want something in the background, want to do a whole like marathon the way I'm doing it now, leading into Deadpool, Wolverine, or the next era of X-Men, if you will. Or if you want to show this to someone for the first time, it's a solid movie. You know what I'm saying? It's not like great, fantastic X-Men, but it's enough to get entertainment. It's enough to get some cool action. It's enough to get some pretty good acting here and stuff like that, and then a pretty damn good representation of a lot of the themes and things that are represented for X-Men in a way that you feel is palpable, and villains and stuff that at least feel more like stereotypical villains, or at least feel like there's something else going on there that's a little more nuanced than the usual thing going on when you have a main character that's supposed to be with the heroes being the antagonist of the film. That's inherently just a little more interesting than what they were doing in Apocalypse with that over-the-top ass cartoon Saturday morning villain that was even more over the top Ivan Ooze than the Saturday morning cartoon villain. So that was the issue. There's no clear story, no clear motivation. I want your body because mine's dying off. It's boring. There's no nuance. There's no substance to it. So that was the whole thing missing. Other than Magneto's motivation for being in the Four Horsemen of in Apocalypse, that was the only element to me that was anything close to any of the character stuff going on here in Dark Phoenix. So that's pretty much my whole thing with it. Next up, we got the Wolverine and Logan. We're going to be getting into pretty much the rest of this week's going to be all Wolverine week, you know what I'm saying? Next week, we're going to do Deadpool 1 and 2, leading into the Deadpool and Wolverine spoiler-free review. When I get a chance to see it next weekend, it will be up on the channel ASAP, like next Friday or so. So make sure you're keeping your eyes peeled for all that. And we got all the previous X-Men review installments, going back to the OG X-Men. We already got through the terrible Wolverine prequel. We finally got through this quadrilogy of the X-Men prequels. So now we're going to end it up with, in my opinion, some of the best movies in the X-Men franchise, bar none, right here with the Wolverine and Deadpool films, leaning into Wolverine and Deadpool. It's going to be fucking awesome, guys. It's going to be a great time. I got some really fun videos planned for y'all in the meantime that aren't just recent releases, some cool niche stuff. You might see some returning guests and whatnot, so make sure you stay in tune. Don't sleep on any of this stuff, and I appreciate each and every one of you. And thanks for sticking around to the end, and until next time, peace.